What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be talking about a brand new movie that I'm getting to check out just a little bit early, and that movie is called High Heat. Directed by Zach Golden and written by James Peterson, this film stars people like Olga Kurylenko, Don Johnson, Kaitlin, Doubleday, Dallas Page, Ivan Martin, and many, many more. I'd like to start this off by saying a big thanks to those over at Saban Films for sending me over another early screener. I just covered a new film from theirs that came out this past week called Black Warrant, and to be completely honest, I was not a huge fan of that movie. But today we're talking about High Heat, another new film that's actually coming out later this week on December 16th and will be available on VOD, on demand, and in select theaters on December 16th. So again, a big thanks to them for sending me over another early screener, and let's get into my thoughts on this movie. Now, as I usually do with early screeners that are sent to me, unless it's something that I was already anticipating or something that I reached out for myself that I was already aware of, I usually go into these blind. I don't really know much outside of the poster or some imagery I've seen, and I usually don't watch a trailer or read a synopsis in any way, shape, or form. So similarly, I went into this film with very little knowledge on what this movie was all about, but I am going to talk about the base premise here, so I will be giving you guys a little bit more than I went in with, but I will be staying away from spoilers as I still haven't seen a trailer for this, and I don't really know how much it leans into, and I have read the synopsis now that I've seen the movie, and I realize that it does leave things kind of vague. So for that sake, I will be kind of staying away from spoilers or anything like that, but I am going to talk about the general premise right now. High Heat focuses on a married couple that is having their opening day of a brand new restaurant. The wife is the chef of this establishment, and she takes it very, very seriously. She loves food, and she takes the way that her kitchen is ran very seriously. The husband is the one who runs the front of house and is kind of the face of the restaurant and the one who connects with the guest out there in the front of house, and they both serve a different purpose in each other's lives. Not too long into the film, we end up finding out that the husband, Ray, actually got his wife into the newspaper. He shows her this newspaper article with a picture of her on there, and she seems a little bit uncomfortable with that. She's kind of like, how did you make this happen? He's like, hey, listen, I wanted to try to get the word out there. Let's get this restaurant going, this, that, and the third. She seems grateful, and then we move on. And shortly after that, we have two mafia members who end up showing up to the restaurant, and we end up finding out that Ray actually made a deal with the mafia where he actually got some money from them in order to start up this restaurant as well as other restaurants. And the day has come where he has to pay due. And now the villains of this story want to come after this wife and husband duo, burning down their establishment in order to get the insurance money. But it doesn't just end with these guys trying to burn down this building and get the insurance money. It actually turns out that the wife in this situation, Anna, actually has a very specific set of skills and has a very dark background that her husband Ray was not aware of. And that's where I'll leave the premise of this movie. We have this individual who has this dark history and this dark past and is very skillful when it comes to taking down assailants. And then you have the husband who has a dark history of his own, but was far more into, making some poor money decisions. And now that's coming down on both his wife and him, and they have to defend their restaurant from the mafia. And overall, I'm happy to say I enjoyed the film. I found it to be a good time. There was a part about this film, from its animated opening into the actual tone of the film and the action of this film, that reminded me a lot of films from the 90s, specifically the late 90s, as well as the early 2000s. And I don't mean that in a bad way in any way, shape, or form. I grew up in that era. I love films of that era. And so there was kind of a throwback feel in terms of tone from this film to those films back of that era. But, because of that, there is that element of me kind of looking at this and saying, well, this is no John Wick or Atomic Blonde. It feels a lot more old school in its action, which is just fine, but it's not necessarily something that felt super modern. Overall, I found the performances to be pretty solid, outside of a couple of moments where there are some performances that I thought were not all that great in the film or felt kind of generic. And I would say that was probably my issue with this film overall, is there's just sprinkling of too many generic moments or too many generic things, whether it be the cinematography that felt kind of stale or the story that over time just kind of felt like it needed needed more to it. There was just something about this film that, for lack of a better word, kind of feels like it needed seasoning on it, to be completely honest. There was an element about this film that felt like it could have been a lot better, even though I can also admit that I was enjoying myself. I was never fully bored or disconnected from the film, but there were moments that I kind of found myself checking the runtime or looking down at my phone for a moment. Not for very long, but there was just a couple of moments that bored me, moments of dialogue, or just feeling like we're stretching things out way longer than it needs to be stretched out in. And that tends to be the case when you have a movie that takes place in one location. You know, it can be very challenging to create a story and a set of characters that are going to be super memorable and exciting and tension-filled in a situation that majority of the film takes place in one location. And I think for the most part, this film pulls it off. I really enjoyed the husband-wife duo in this film, specifically the wife, since she's the one who's beating everybody's ass really in this film, and she has this dark history, this dark past. And that was another thing I didn't like about the film as much, was that we have these characters with this past that a lot of times seems more interesting than what we're actually seeing in the film. I almost wanted to be able to see some of that past, and then the film doesn't really tackle a lot of that as much. There is moments of dialogue and things that we get that do expand upon the past, but it's not as deep as I would have liked it to have been, even if I was enjoying myself while watching the film. Dallas Page plays the main villain of this film, named Dom, who's the leader of this mafia group. He has his son Mickey, who he sends out to initially go get the husband in the situation, Ray, and there isn't really too much going on with Dom in this film. He's just a bad guy at the top who keeps sending a bunch of his minions to go and try to burn this establishment and try to kill this husband and wife duo in order for them to get their insurance money. And he just really doesn't do much. He just kind of stands around. And that was probably my biggest issue with the film, is I found that the characters, specifically on the villain side, were all super one-dimensional, super dull, super boring, and they served a purpose for the movie and for, you know, them to kind of get their ass kicked, which led to some fun action. But as a villain, as a group of villains, they were pretty generic and standard, and they didn't really, for me, do much in this movie. But if you're going into this movie for something that's just kind of, hey, something to pass the time, if you ever see this on something like Netflix or Hulu or whatever streaming service in the future, I do think it's worth watching as just something to kind of throw on. I don't think it's a phenomenal film. I don't think it's a film that's going to blow people's socks off. In a lot of ways, it does have some generic energy, but there is elements about the film that I found myself enjoying, especially as we do start to uncover more things about Anna, the wife's past, learning more about where she learned her skills and how she kind of came to be who she is. Again, I wish they dived a little bit deeper into that element, but the elements they do dive into were definitely really awesome. And I think definitely a highlight for me in this film is Kaitlin Doubleday, who appears later on in the film, and I won't get into what her role is, but she does have history with the wife in the situation, Anna, and I did really enjoy their time together spent on screen. I felt like that was probably some of the best exploration of who Anna used to be, and I kind of wish that we got a little bit more of that. But yeah, guys, I don't have too much more to say without diving deep into spoilers. This was an enjoyable time. It's nothing crazy. I'm probably going to give it something like a 3-star on Letterboxd. Not a top tier movie, but not a bad movie. There was some humor that didn't work throughout, but there was some humor that also worked. Generic bad guys in a 2000s tone. It was enjoyable if you like stuff like that. I enjoyed it for what it was. I sat back and just kind of threw it on, wasn't bored, enjoyed the runtime. It was like an hour and 23 minutes, not a long runtime, so it didn't really overstay its welcome. I do wish they would have added a little bit more seasoning, as I mentioned, to the story, expanded on some elements, and kind of fleshed out some of the dialogue and characters a little bit better, especially on the villain side. But for what it is, it's a harmless watch. I don't necessarily know if I'm telling you to go and rush to theaters to see it when it comes out or pay for the full price purchase on VOD. But if you ever see it somewhere like a streaming service, I think it's at least worth watching if you like movies like this. So big thanks to you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Please do hit that like button, comment your thoughts, and subscribe for more videos. Bye-bye.